I hope everybody had a very Merry Christmas and that everybody got what they wanted for Christmas and that everyone just had a really good holiday season overall. If you don't celebrate Christmas, I hope your holidays in general were good this month. And yeah, so welcome to Divergence and Divine. My name is WIllspiration, and today I want to talk about something that I actually saw online recently, which is the topic of autism and it being classified as a disability. So the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because it's a little tricky, just because of the fact that it is a disability, yes, but at the same time, I think it's kind of one of those topics that's a little bit tricky, more so due to the fact of how autism affects everybody differently, hence why it's called a spectrum. And I think for me personally, I think more profound levels of autism, like, levels 2 and 3, are definitely more disabling. But when you're talking about like autism spectrum disorder, level 1, or like if you were diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome before it was done away with in 2013, okay. Well, I shouldn't say that Asperger's was done away with. The diagnosis of Asperger was done away with because it was merged with autism spectrum disorder level 1. So if you have a previous diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome, you're technically autism spectrum disorder level 1. So you are still autistic, yes. My understanding is that Asperger's was just essentially like a sub-branch almost of autism because it's very similar, but not, it doesn't really have it's similar, I guess, issues that autism does. At least that's my understanding of it. But the reason why I want to talk about it is because for me, I'm autism spectrum disorder level 1. I was diagnosed when I was 27. I am 32. And for me personally, I don't, as an autistic ADHD person, I personally don't feel disabled by my neurodivergence. And I know that's probably a very hot take. I don't think there's a lot of neurodivergent people out there that feel that way. They probably definitely do feel like it's a disability. But I think for me, it really, I don't know. I just never really, well, okay, how should I put this? Because when I was younger, yes, it was. Like, I was sensitive to sound, smell, everything. But it just seemed like as I got older and essentially kind of forced to tolerate it because I was never diagnosed, I just kind of feel like it didn't really feel disabling anymore because it's just like, all of a sudden, I can stand loud noises. Do I like loud noises? No, absolutely not. Sometimes I still jump, but I don't cry anymore or, just immediately go into a meltdown like I used to when I was a kid. And then there's I can work a full-time job. I can drive. I live on my own. I have friends. I don't feel disabled at all by my neurodivergence. And again, it's like, it could just be because of how being on the spectrum affects me, but I think there's also that issue too where, in my opinion, it's like, okay, if every level of autism is considered a disability, then why is it that me with autism spectrum disorder level 1 and ADHD can't get assistance because I'm quote unquote not autistic enough for assistance, because I can drive, because I can work a full-time job, because I can live, on my own. So to me, I just feel like, okay, then why isn't it more specified to, certain levels then get, like, why, like, levels 2 and 3 get assistance, but, like, if there is something for level 1 autism that maybe you do struggle with that does feel debilitating, then how come you can't get assistance for it if it's just one thing, just because other things you've learned to tolerate or don't bother you, because that's not how being on the spectrum affects you personally, but affects somebody else. So for me, I just kind of feel like the whole classification of it being a disability is very messy. It's not organized enough. I feel like there's definitely, it needs to be structured more, because I don't know. I just feel like because it's a spectrum and everyone is affected differently, I still feel like autism spectrum disorder level 1 people should not be outcasted or segregated from being given assistance if they need it, because they're just not quote unquote autistic enough. So that's why, like, to me, I find the whole classification of it being a disability very confusing, because it's like, for me, like, I have severe executive dysfunction, right? So yeah, I can live on my own, but like, I might need help. I need help with like cooking and cleaning, because I mean, for me, like, cooking is still very overwhelming. I can cook, yeah, but like, I would prefer not to, but then my health will ultimately pay a price if I don't, right? Cleaning is not as bad. Cleaning, I can clean. It's just kind of more so the ADHD side of just, it's very time consuming and it doesn't give me any sort of dopamine. Even when I do finish the task, I'm like, yay, that really didn't do anything for me, but yay. So cleaning is more so from the ADHD side, but the cooking is kind of a little overstimulating. Again, not to the point where I can't do it. It's just kind of very tedious. So then the ADHD kind of also creeps in there, and it's just like, it's not worth doing all of that. But still, I could use a little help with cooking. And it's just like, oh, well, you can do everything else just fine. So, clearly you're not autistic enough for help. So again, then it also kind of brings me to my personal experience of being autistic and ADHD, where I don't feel really disabled unless, it does involve cooking a little bit. It's just, I feel it's just done so terribly, because it's like, okay, for me personally, when I got diagnosed, it was just kind of like, oh, yay, I'm happy. I know why I'm different now. I don't feel so bad about myself. And then that word disability is just like the only thing I could think about. I'm like, all of a sudden, I'm like, now I'm a disabled person. I'm like, but I'm not disabled in the traditional sense of like, being paralyzed, or like, having a limb amputated and having a prosthetic, not physically, disabled. And it's just kind of like, but even then, I don't feel mentally disabled. I mean, sure, like cooking, makes me feel like that sometimes, but not to the point where it actually is like crippling and I can't do it. It's like I can push through it. It's uncomfortable, but I can do it because I know I have to do it for myself. And to me, that's kind of where I feel like I want to kind of spread more awareness about it, where if you are on the spectrum, like, whether you just have autism spectrum disorder level 1, or if you had been diagnosed with Asperger's before it was done away with and merged with autism spectrum disorder level 1, that, or if you have both, autism level 1 and ADHD, be it inattentive, hyperactive, or combined in my case, if you personally feel like you don't fit that disabled description, because it's not like your life is impacted by everything every single day, then I feel like those people should be allowed to be like, hey, I know that typically this is considered a disability, but I myself personally don't feel disabled. And that pretty much goes back to invalidating everyone's experience on the spectrum, because autism, like I said earlier, is a spectrum. It affects everybody differently. Autism affects me one way, and it will affect somebody who's autistic a completely different way. And I think that everybody should be entitled to be able to speak freely about how being on the spectrum affects them. So if I say I personally don't feel disabled, because I can do a lot of things, and for that I'm very grateful, I don't feel like, other people should come at me and be like, oh, well, then you're not autistic because you don't feel disabled. It's like, yeah, but I'm also, that's just how being on the spectrum affects me. Like, you can't invalidate my experiences on the spectrum because I don't go around saying, well, I don't feel disabled, so why do you feel disabled? If you feel disabled, then maybe you have, maybe you're level 3, because now I'm invalidating a level 1 autistic's experience by claiming that, hold on, let me rephrase that. Hold on. I'm basically saying I'm invalidating their experience because I'm basically saying that if they feel disabled, that they're more autistic than they believe or were told that they are, which isn't fair to them either. And I feel like it just kind of goes back to how every human is different. Like, we're all different people. We all have, things affect us differently, health and, and everything like that. Like, even our personalities are different, right? But in a world where, authenticity and genuineness is not very common anymore, it almost feels like it's kind of starting, in my opinion, starting to bleed into the autism community, because now it's just like, if you don't agree that you're disabled, even if you're level 1, then you clearly got misdiagnosed. It's like, no, that's not how it works. See, and I feel like a lot of people's, like, I guess, knowledge of this is so limited that they think that autism is, you have to be level 2 or level 3, and that level 2 is considered high functioning and that level 3 is considered low functioning. And then if you're not level 2 or level 3, then you're not autistic, right? Which isn't true, because, again, it basically affects everyone differently than how it affects them. So you're basically going around and validating other people's experience. It's like if someone has been through something traumatic and they've done the work to do their best to heal from it, knowing full well that what they experienced was very real and horrific and terrifying and painful, and they still push through to try to heal as much as possible so that that fear doesn't overtake them every single day. And then they're told by someone else that has had a similar traumatic experience that, oh, well, then they must not have had a traumatizing experience because, it should be affecting them every single day. It should be a reminder every single day that they survived. Because now that person that survived a similar trauma to the person that they're criticizing is basically saying, your experience as somebody that's been through a traumatic experience like I have is not valid because you're still not traumatized. Trauma never goes away. Well, you're partially right. Trauma doesn't go away, but you also can make the conscious effort to not let that trauma hold you down the rest of your life. You have that option to heal as much as possible from that trauma and not let it hold you back forever. You have that option to not let it ruin you and change who you are because, of somebody that, tried to hurt you or did hurt you. Because at the end of the day, that person isn't sorry, right? That person's never going to apologize to you for what they did because they're just mentally messed up in the head. So, again, it just goes around. It's like And even then, if we want to talk about like something that's not as serious, I mean, going around and telling somebody that they can't like something because it's childish, or you can't, or like, oh, that's gross that you like this, is also invalidating somebody's life experience. You're just telling them that their life experience, like their personal opinion, is not valid because it doesn't align to your opinions and your, the way you see life and the way that, and your like, and the things that you like and dislike. And it's really sad to see because, you would expect that a community with people that are on the spectrum would be more, I guess, welcoming and accepting. And it's just like, you can go on to any of the autism subreddits that exist out there, and there are people, on the spectrum fighting with each other because, one is invalidating the experience of another. When I went on a subreddit and gave my opinions on what has helped me to not, feel so, I guess, bad about myself and being on the spectrum, I had someone come and tell me that they were traumatized by, being assaulted, which I won't go into specifics of what kind of assault, just because I don't know if my, if this video would get demonetized when I get around to actually qualifying for monetization. But we're just going to leave it vague and just leave it at assault. But she was telling me that, my tips were essentially invalid because, she was happy and positive when she was assaulted, and that, basically I was making her experience invalidated by saying that, mindset is a huge part of it, of like not letting yourself feel bad about being on the spectrum. And if you look at the statistics, yes, autistic women are I think it's 5 times more likely to be in abusive relationships and be assaulted than, non-autistic women. But like, to come at me when I'm just trying to genuinely help somebody and be like, this is, what helped me, and maybe it can help you, and that, I know that everyone on the spectrum is different, so, all these 8 or 10 points that I made may not even help you. But if even just one of them can help you, like, that would be more than enough for me, to be like, hey, I helped somebody, and yeah, sure, maybe the things that helped me didn't help them, but at least something did. And I feel like that was kind of like a shock to me, was just like, wow, you literally came at me for trying to be helpful because, you have trauma, and apparently me trying to help somebody triggered your trauma, which, I did the right thing, and I apologized. I told her that, I wasn't trying to invalidate what happened to her, and that, that I was very sorry that she was assaulted, but she also can't come at me and invalidate my experience as an autistic person because, a piece of advice that I gave that helped me to try to help the post, like the user that, the original poster, of that, of that little thread in the subreddit, was not aimed at her. It was geared towards that person because the person was talking about how they felt when I was, in my early 20s, except for, this person actually went to college, like they're in college right now. And everything that they were talking about, like the way they see themselves and, the struggles, I'm like, this is literally me and how I felt about myself at 21, except for I didn't know that I was autistic. So I was just like, well, here's what has helped me. Because I told them, I'm like, I felt that way my whole life. Even after I got diagnosed at 27, I said, I didn't start feeling better until I hit 30, and I started working on on myself. And that was essentially where like I kind of started growing and changing and kind of really starting to accept who I am as a person. But I was not expecting that there would be people in the community that would be so hostile and be coming at me because I gave someone advice and that advice was a trigger, and I don't even know who this person is. They're just a random person on the internet and they're coming at me because I accidentally triggered them. And it's like, I'm sorry I triggered you, but I also don't know who you are, so how was I supposed to know that that was a trigger? And then at the same time, you can't come and invalidate my experience and the things that have helped me, build up self-confidence and self-love because it triggered you. Like, even in the autism community, it's still the same. People are still gonna think things, are aimed at them to try to make them feel bad, or just considered bogus advice because it's something that they've already tried. But it's also just easier to not respond because I'm going to be honest, I'm the same way. Sometimes there's things that, will trigger me and kind of make me feel like my autism experience is invalidated. And then I'll like start typing like an angry comment and wanting to vent and go off on somebody. And then I just stop typing. I minimize the app, swipe up and close it. And then I go, you know what? It's not worth it. It's not worth me going off on a person because they want to, say something that makes me feel invalidated when somebody else might not even be offended by this, or it may not even trigger this person. So really, there's no sense in me going off because now I'm making myself look immature, and two, there's going to be people that are like, well, I didn't find it offensive and you need to calm down. And that person could be autistic too, and being told that, telling someone else that they need to calm down because it's not serious. So like, as I've gotten older, I've just realized that that sense of like needing to stand up for myself because I feel like I'm being attacked personally is like diminishing, because it's just kind of like, well, I don't want to make myself look bad, and I don't want to, make myself look like a complete idiot because I took something that offended me and ran with it when a lot of other people like me probably weren't offended at all. So I'm just going to ignore this comment and I'm not going to respond to it because it's not worth my time. It was like how some guy posted a short about how Mufasa, the live action Lion King movie, was losing out to Sonic the Hedgehog, the movie 3. And the dude said that in the video, like in the skit, he's like, it seems that the autistic Sonic fans have beaten out the cringe Disney adults. And I was like, to me, grammatically speaking, the way that the guy phrased it was, every Sonic fan is autistic. Not every Sonic fan is autistic. And then somebody had the nerve like to comment and then go off on me because I just essentially said, hey, I thought the skit was funny, but I do kind of want to warn you about, your phrasing next time, pointing out, that his phrasing kind of implies that every Sonic fan is autistic and that every adult Disney fan is cringe, when in reality, there aren't as many people that fit that category in those communities, because you're saying the whole community is that when they're not. And someone was just like, he wasn't saying that every Sonic fan is autistic. He was saying that, he's only saying that because Sonic is an icon in the autism community. I'm like, and then I was going to, reply to the person and be like, hey, did you even read my comment? I said that the wording sounded like that. I'm not going off on him. You need to calm down because you're taking my comment as if I'm complaining and I'm not. Because I want people to be aware too that like sometimes your wording, can say certain things and that people are going to take that out of context. And I'm by no means a grammar Nazi, but I also know that when certain words are strung together, it implies a whole rather than a part. And the way that he had worded his skit was implying that the community as a whole was autistic and not part of the community is autistic. It's still great short though. I liked the video. It was a great short, but I just want to help make sure that people are kind of aware of how they word things if they are going to use autism as a joke. Because I don't know this YouTuber. This YouTuber could be autistic himself and a huge Sonic fan. Maybe that commenter was right. Maybe that's what he was implying, that the subsection of the Sonic fan base that is autistic beat out the subsection of the adult Disney fans that are cringe. And maybe I read too much into that. But at the end of the day, you also can't come at me with an attitude like that. Keep it civil. My comment was very civil. It was just, just out of curiosity and just making sure that in the future, your wording's a little bit better. That's all. Because I know that there is there are some like influencers and, YouTubers and, content creators out there that are more prominent in the autism and ADHD community and like in the neurodivergent community as a whole, that are way more popular than me. And they're basically trying to, tell people like, oh, you can't even joke about autism. Like, that's not right. You are invalidating every single autistic person's experience by joking about autism. The one content creator had shown a video by a nurse who thinks that every doctor anybody that's a doctor has to have some form of autism, playing into the stereotype of autistic people are geniuses. And that, even if they don't know it, that they have some sort of mild like autism, and then refer to it as, has a touch of the tism. And this one content creator, she literally roasted this nurse because she's like, using touch of the tism is offensive and it validates everyone's experience. And, you can't joke around like that. You do not have the right to use our disability as a joke for your video. And it's like, but meanwhile, there were probably autistic people in the comment section that were probably laughing at it and thought it was funny, So this content creator was basically going around saying that my experience on the spectrum is superior. My experience on the spectrum is how most people feel being on the spectrum. When in reality, not everyone on the spectrum feels the way that she does. Just like how I started off the video, like this podcast, by saying how I personally don't feel disabled by autism. And even the mild feeling of disabled that I do have is with cooking, but not to the point where it's actually debilitating, right? But for me, that's my personal experience on the spectrum. As an autism level 1 and ADHD person, that's just how it affects me. But another autism level 1 and ADHD person could actually feel disabled and still have more meltdowns than I have, because I usually only have like maybe 1 or 2 a year. Maybe. And even now, with all the work that I've done in therapy and with my spiritualism, with doing Reiki and like my life coaching with my Reiki teacher, I don't think I had a single meltdown all year, except for in the summer when my sister was saying that I needed to be put under a guardianship. But if my sister would have left that alone, I would have went this entire year without having a meltdown. And I'm super proud of myself for that. Am I trying to invalidate another autistic person's experience by saying that? Absolutely not. I am very well aware that autism affects everyone differently. I am very well aware that the 3 levels also affect everyone differently. And that even having ADHD can also affect the way that, interacts with autism and vice versa. I am very well aware of the fact that my experiences are totally different than the next person's. Even looking at it as a whole and throwing neurodivergence and neurotypical out the window and just seeing everyone as an individual human being, my life experience is completely different from the next person's, neurodivergent or not. And I don't have any right to invalidate their experience in life because of the fact that my life, goes like this when theirs doesn't. So at the end of the day, the key takeaway from this episode is that don't go around trying to invalidate others' experiences by saying that, just because autism affects you this way, that yours, your experience is more superior to someone else's. What really helps in getting to grow as a person is learning how other people's life experiences affect them. Like, oh, I didn't know that's how that affected you. Like, and be supportive and be like, if it makes you feel better, there are certain things that being on the spectrum makes me feel like this. I know it's probably not much, but like I understand how, what you're coming from. And it's like, it's only that one thing. So I can't even imagine how it feels like to feel it that often in your everyday life. And the other thing I would just say is that, like, however autism affects you, it's okay to own that because that is your lived experience. But again, don't go trying to invalidate other people's lived experiences as well. Because I feel like things are getting out of hand and, we need to kind of understand that we are all different. Being on the spectrum affects everybody differently. So let's just come together and support each other. But anyway, that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope, you guys can start spreading some more positivity and acceptance and, compassion in the autism community with this. And then next week, assuming that I remember, because I'll probably forget until somebody leaves it in the comments. But I definitely want to try to focus on the, 8 to 10 things that have helped me feel better about being neurodivergent. I was thinking about including them in here, and then I was like, nah, I don't think so. I'm like, I think I'll just save that for next week. Again, I might forget, so don't hold me to it, because there is a chance I might forget. But as always, if you guys like this episode, make sure you drop a like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, because that'll let you know when I post new videos. And yeah, I will see you guys next week. Bye.